Hi, I'm Kate Allison, a yoga therapist in Davidson, North Carolina. Welcome to Yoga for Pelvic Floor Health. This practice applies for both men and women. Our pelvic floor is a taboo space for a lot of people. It's a private space, a space that also may have known significant trauma or stress. Some issues that can present with the pelvic floor in men can have to do with an enlarged prostate or complications after managing prostate cancer and treatment for prostate cancer. In women, some considerations can be complications after an assault or after a challenging childbirth. Other things that can happen include vulvodynia, and a pressure and a discomfort on the outside of the vagina and the vulva. Vaginismus and non-voluntary spasms in the vagina that can be really painful and uncomfortable. There can also be complications from IBS that cause discomfort in the pelvic floor, along with interstitial cystitis or frequent urge to urinate, or complications in the bladder. So our pelvic floor encompasses so many pieces, right? It's connected to our sexuality, it's connected to birth, it's connected to how we urinate and defecate on a daily basis. So it's important for us to be able to feel comfortable and safe with our pelvic floor. As we move through this practice today, I would invite you to listen to your body. Your body holds this wisdom. Pain is an indicator to stop, to back off. We aren't searching to lean into pain today. We're searching to make friends with our pelvic floor. And the principles that we're going to use to do this are assuming that our pelvic floor is tense, which often could be the case. Sometimes we hold tension in our pelvis, just like we might in our jaw or our shoulders. So we're going to operate on an assumption that there's tension there and move towards relaxation, awareness, strengthening, relaxation. That's going to be our flow today. As always, if something doesn't feel right in your body, please honor that. Please listen to your body. You know your body best. These are all just invitations to explore. Let's get started. You'll notice I'm sitting up on a block. This just gives my hips a little more space and room. You're also welcome to just sit on the floor, on a bolster, or even in a comfortable chair if that's where your body's at right now. I'd like to invite you to start with a yoni mudra, which is going to be taking our index fingers together and our thumbs together, and the rest of our fingers pointing down over our lower abdomen. And we're just going to start with some simple awareness of the breath. So if it feels comfortable for you to lower or close your eyes, you're welcome to do so. I invite you to just notice. Notice the rhythm of your inhale and your exhale. Our mudra and our hand positioning is focusing our awareness on the pelvic bowl, the pelvic floor, which holds the rest of our core up, supports us, hammocks our organs. Notice the rhythm of the inhale and the exhale as it moves through your body, without trying to audit or change it in any way right now. I invite you to notice, is your breath moving your hands at all? Or perhaps the breath is not moving so far down into the abdomen. And I invite you to join me as we start our practice with 3 ohms, bathing our pelvic floor or pelvic bowl with om, or simply listening, receiving the sound. Notice where those ohms may be lingering in your body. I find sound to be a very helpful tool when we're talking about our pelvic floor. And this comes from the law of sphincters, right? Our throat, as it opens the diaphragm and can open the pelvic floor. This is why it can feel very helpful when in childbirth to moan or om or vocalize as you use your voice to open down through the pelvis as well. Feel free to release your mudra for a moment and invite your awareness to come into your sits bones, the bony parts that are possibly connected to the floor or your block. And I'd invite you to pour your weight over to the left side. And this is subtle, it's internal. It's almost like we've just decided to kind of cock our hip in a little bit of a way or pour that awareness down into this left side. Just be curious what that feels like, what you sense in your body. And then pour your weight over to the right side. Notice any subtle differences in the two sides. You may then pour your weight forward, creating a pelvic tilt, as if your pelvic bowl were holding these sacred waters and you were pouring it forward. Notice what else happens in your body with that. I sense an arching of my lower back, a curve there. And then notice what happens if you tuck your tail, pouring the waters backwards. I feel my core contracting. I sense the tailbone sort of elongating, a C in my spine. Just notice. And then coming back to center, become aware of any other sensations that you're feeling. Good. If you have a bolster, it may be helpful to grab one. And while you're grabbing props, you might also grab either a tennis ball or a dryer ball, or I like to use a doubly folded pair of socks that are sort of wrapped up. And I have a firmer pair of socks, my winter socks, and a summer pair that's a little bit more squishy, my summer socks. So those might be some tools. You might also grab a strap or a sandbag or a blanket. And remember, props are not necessary. You're also welcome to make do with what you have, which may be blankets, pillows. Those can also help. I want us to move into a position that I like to call just a saddle seat. I get this from riding horses, and the pressure of the saddle has helped me to connect in with my pelvic floor more, providing more sensory input so that I can have increased proprioceptive awareness, which is sensing my body in time and space. So I'm going to move off my block here, and I'm going to set up my saddle, which for me looks like just a bolster. And if you prop your block up forward, it's going to give you more pressure on the front of your pelvic floor. If you prop it up backwards, like this, towards the back of your bolster, it's going to give you more pressure towards the back of your pelvic floor and your rectum. So if you notice that there's a part of your body you're less connected to, you might prop your bolster into that position. Or if you want to, you can just leave it as is. Depending on knee comfort, right? Like my knees tend to have a fair amount of space, so this is comfortable for me, but you may need 2 or 3 bolsters so that you're really propped up. You can also, bear with me as I'm repositioning here, you can also use blankets and other things behind the knees to create a little bit more cushion if this is bothering your knees or your ankles. So lots of modifications available. Make sure that it's comfortable for you. Okay, so I'm in my saddle seat, right? Take a deep breath. Notice what you're feeling, what you're sensing. And I would invite you to again become aware of these different parts of the pelvic floor. So pour your weight over to the left side. Noticing where else you sense this in the body. Pour your weight over to the right side. Pour your weight forward. Pour your weight backward. And then I'd invite you to explore what feels good, right? So you might take some pelvic circles as if that bowl were a clock face, rotating around the clock. And if you go in one direction, you might reverse and go in the other direction. You may just play with an anterior, posterior movement, or forward and backward, or side to side. Give yourself freedom and permission to dance with it. And as you are, I invite you to become curious. Are there parts of the pelvic floor that feel more tense? Maybe even towards pain. And if there are, just note that and back away from the edge. In this practice of mindful, therapeutic yoga, we want to explore those edges and then back up. Our goal is not to lean into pain. It's to lean into perhaps a strong sensation and slowly build out from there. So finding this movement, then slowly settling into a center. And as you find your center here, we're going to play with Mula bandha and Ashwini. If you've watched my Yoga for Diastasis Recti, you've done this practice with me before. Mula bandha is going to be a squeezing of the pelvic floor and the vagina muscles. It's almost like your sits bones are sort of pulling together, and then your vagina is holding, and then a release. And you can flow on this with your breath. So it sort of is a personal experience with where you're inhaling and exhaling. If you need to pull forward on your saddle to be able to feel the lift of the front of your pelvic floor and the release, you may do so. And as you're squeezing, notice if there's any other part of your body that's working. I sense my glutes wanting to kick on, my abs wanting to kick on. So noticing, can we just isolate the front of the pelvic floor? Go ahead and release that. Find a little rocking, a little bit of movement. And then I invite you to lean back for Ashwini. So this is going to be a squeezing of the rectum. So it's kind of the movement and the sensation of holding in a fart, to be honest. And that's important, right? We want to be able to control that. So holding in and releasing, inviting it to marry the movement with your breath. And inhale and exhale. Inhale and an exhale. Notice what other muscles are trying to contract with those muscles. Right? Our pelvic floor is layers on layers of different muscles, creating this beautiful hammock to hold our core in, right? To support all of our organs. So just noticing, can you tap into that sensation of just isolating the anal sphincter, the rectum, and go ahead and release. Move your hips a little bit. Good. If you want to challenge yourself, you can now play with alternating. Can you move towards the front of the pelvic floor and then the back of the pelvic floor? So it might look like a squeeze and a release of the front of the pelvic floor. And I might lean back to give me more proprioceptive awareness, more sensation on which muscles I'm trying to isolate in the back. Come back to center. Find any movements that feel good to you. Good. Let's move our bolster out of the way. Good. And we're going to come to a comfortable seat. So that could look like your legs out. That could look like Baddha Konasana with feet in. It could look like sitting cross-legged. Now's a nice time to grab your socks. And if this is too much sensation, then you might just sit on maybe the edge of a meditation pillow or a blanket or just the floor, right? So what you're going to do, and we're only going to spend a few moments in this video exploring this, but this is an invitation for you to explore this a little bit more on your own at home. But we're going to use our socks to place them under our sits bones or under one side and then perhaps the other, almost like a massage tool. So you may find a place that's a little sensitive, like I have it right under my right sits bones, maybe near where like the hamstring inserts, so sort of right under the glute. And I'm just finding a little bit of movement there. Breathing into that space. It may be helpful to think about the sensation on a spectrum of 0 to 10. We want to stick within maybe a 6 or a 7, but not beyond that. So if you get into a pressure point, a trigger point that's like a 9 or a 10, we're going to move the socks out of the way and allow us to work around that place before diving right in. So noticing that awareness, and as you notice that you're just lingering on a spot and breathing into it, does that sensation refer up to other positions in your body? So for example, sometimes when I'm working in my hips, I'll feel it up into my neck or my jaw, and just be curious of that. So maybe find another position for your socks. You can even sit directly on your socks too and notice what that sensation feels like. Sort of like a massage or just an awareness. Remember, listen to your body. If something doesn't feel right for you, leave it. That's okay. That's important because that builds trust in our pelvic floor. We want our pelvic floor to know in these practices we're taking really good care of it, and that we're going to listen when it speaks to us and tells us, that's not for me. We're going to honor that. So I would invite you to play with that sort of exploration of sensitive points of relaxation using the socks if that feels helpful for you. You could pause the video now and explore that further, or we can carry on. It's up to you. All right, let's move into a supported, or not supported yet. We're going to bring our bolster out in a second, but let's move into Baddha Konasana, but reclining. So if it's comfortable for you, go ahead and lie back, and I'm going to move my microphone here a little bit out of the way. Go ahead and lie back. You could have your feet on the floor and just rock your hips a little bit, noticing the support of the floor beneath you. If it feels good to you, you might then take your right leg and use a strap or a scarf or just hold behind your knee, either one of those, and place it around the sole of your right foot. And just slowly, keeping your left foot anchored, begin to open out on an inhale. Exhale, coming back to center. And as you do, I want you to invite you to become aware of all the ways that muscles are kicking on as you do this. So where do you feel it kick on? Where do you feel it kind of come back and rest? And keeping your left hip anchored. So your left hip sort of stays on the ground. If you notice like my leg is getting some slight tremors, and we've talked about tremoring in other videos together, that's just the body releasing stress. So allow that to happen if that feels good to you. Let's take one more, inhaling and exhaling. Go ahead and bring your right foot down to the floor. Take a moment to notice any subtle differences in the two sides. Can you sense where in the body we were working? Where was stretching? Can you sense the difference in those two sensations? And then when you're ready, we'll switch to the other side. So looping your strap around the ball of the left foot. Right? Our right hip stays anchored, and on an inhale, inviting your left leg to open. Exhale, closing. Move with your breath, noticing where those muscles kick on and off. Noticing the sensations. Be curious about how this side might feel different than the other side. Be curious about how your right hip is working to anchor you. It might be helpful to even keep a hand on that hip flexor just to notice what muscles have to work to keep you centered here. Good. And then coming back to center, releasing your foot down, noticing what that feels like. If it feels good to rock your hips a little side to side, forward and back, you're welcome to do so. And then we're going to set up for our final pose here, our shavasana, in a supported Supta Baddha Konasana. So take your time to get really comfortable in this. I like to bring a bolster under my spine. I'm going to move my microphone. I also like to bring a blanket as a pillow under my neck. You might use a strap to kind of support your feet or hold them. A blanket across your feet and around your hips can also be helpful. For more instruction on how to set up a supported Supta Baddha Konasana, you can also check out my Yoga for Restoration video. If you have a sandbag and it feels good, you're welcome to put that over your hips or to let your legs go long and let it rest on your hip flexors like a support here. I leave a little bit of space, like a fist distance, as I come back here, just to support my spine in a natural curve. And then we're coming back. Again, you might need to adjust your glutes here so that you get a nice kind of comfortable position in your pelvis. And then sandbag can be on or off, it's up to you. So go ahead and get into this comfortable position. You might invite the palms to face upwards if that feels good, or the hands to rest on the belly, whatever feels right for you. I invite you to close or lower your eyes, or to keep your eyes open and focused on one gaze point, your drishti anchored. And if it feels all right for you, imagine that you could shrink down to a tiny particle of yourself. If you've ever watched the old 90s show, The Magic School Bus, could be like Miss Frizzle, like shrinking down into a tiny version of yourself that could go into your body. And imagine that you're standing in the space of your pelvic floor. If there's any scar tissue or any places that feel tight with like a fascial tension there, you might find that you have a tool belt with every healing tool that you need to be able to bring peace and calm and healing to that part of your body. You might bring healing balms and salves to the walls of the muscles. You might cradle or hold places that are tight and tense. You might envision yourself laying down petals of flowers or bouquets or beautiful crystal waters as you create this space in the pelvic floor that's a safe space. A space that feels like home and comfort. Notice what it feels like to be in relationship with your pelvic floor. Notice any colors or imagery that bubbles up. And remember, you have every tool you need to bring healing to these muscles and the fascia, the connective tissue around the muscles and the organs. Just picturing yourself supporting the muscles and the body from the inside out. If this feels good to you, you're welcome to pause the video and linger here as long as you need. Or when you feel ready, begin to take a slightly deeper breath inviting some movement in your fingers or toes. You may start to bring your feet to the floor, moving the sandbag if you have one, and just rocking your hips side to side. Slowly begin to rock over to one side, using your arms to press up to a comfortable seat. Take a moment to bring your hands to heart center and feel your pelvic bowl anchored on the earth. Notice any subtle changes or differences from when we began. We'll close with an Om if you'd like, joining in, taking a deep breath in. May all beings be happy and free from suffering, free from the roots of suffering, beginning with me and you today. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions or comments, ways that this video's landed for you, please leave a comment and I'm happy to respond to the best of my ability or see if I can point you in a different direction. Some of the principles that we went over can also be isolated from the video. It may feel helpful to just explore parts of the body through those trigger points. If, for example, you have a C-section scar, noticing it, can you move it gently with your fingers forward and backward or side to side? When we have hard things happen to our body, sometimes the fascia, the connective tissue, binds up around, creating zip ties of tension. And we can gently work on holding and breathing into that space to create a little more peace. Right? That visualization of being able to go into the pelvic bowl can also be helpful. Maybe in the bathtub or right before you go to sleep, to notice what it feels like to make this space a comfortable, homey space for yourself. If you have questions, concerns, please make sure to drop a comment. And if you found this video or other videos helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe to my page to stay up to date on all the latest videos. Thank you. Have a lovely day. One more thing I forgot to mention. 2 books that I've been really interested in that may be helpful for you are Pelvic Liberation by Leslie Howard and The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate and Daniel Mate, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. If you're curious to read more about the intersection of our lives and the pelvic floor, those books might be helpful for you. Thank you. All done.